Okay, go ahead with your intro.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this 19th webinar on the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. This series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars, then webinar series in progress is shown here. Previous episodes of this and the Secret Doctrine series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald Secret Teachings or Secret Doctrine. Okay, we're at the tail end of the Eleusinian mysteries. Last month we continued our study, ending up in this paragraph, which quotes Porphyry, ancient Greek, on the materials used to create sacred art in ancient Greece. Among the most famous pieces sculpted from Parian marble were the Venus de Milo and the winged victory of Samothrace, the latter almost certainly involved in some aspect of the Dionysian mysteries, which we'll be studying soon. In translations of his teacher Plotinus's 6 Aeneids, Porphyry also considers how we might establish an inner vision of this luminous principle. So we'll start right off with a reader for this quote.
I'll go ahead and read it. But how can we identify what has never had any touch of form? We utterly eliminate every kind of form, and the object in which there is none whatever we call matter. To see darkness, the eye withdraws from the light. It is striving to cease from seeing. Therefore, it abandons the light, which would make the darkness invisible. Away from the light, its power is rather that of not seeing than of seeing, and this not seeing is its nearest approach to seeing darkness. So the intellectual principle, in order to see its contrary, matter, must leave its own light locked up within itself, and as it were, go forth from itself into an outside realm. It must ignore its native brightness and submit itself to the very contradiction of its being.
Thank you, BL. Any thoughts or questions on this quote? Okay, black and indigo have often been used in spiritual art to convey beings devoid of the form aspect, as BL was just reading about, as in these images of the Black Madonna and the Hindu Bhadrakali. Of course, you're left with a insolvable paradox because you're creating a form of something that is formless. But the Hindus were particularly excellent at this with their various depictions. Okay, let's finish the paragraph. Can we get a reader, please?
Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Everything luminous was subsequently attributed to the gods, the sphere and all that is spherical, to the universe, to the sun and the moon, sometimes to fortune and to hope, the circle and all circular figures to eternity, to the celestial movements, to the circles and zones of the heavens, the section of circles, to the phases of the moon and pyramids and obelisks, to the igneous principle, and through that to the gods of heaven. A cone expresses the sun, a cylinder the earth, the phallos and triangle, a symbol of the matrix, designate generation.
Thank you, Lynn. Any thoughts or questions? Referencing the circles and zones of the heavens, here's a famous illustration derived from Aristotelian thought that uses concentric circles to describe planetary and cosmic influences, not so much their position in the heavens, but the influences themselves. Could we get a reader for this short quote?
Martha, can you read that for us, please? Oops. Wait a minute. I have to be smarter than my computer.
Good luck.
There we go. All right.
Good job. Yeah. This diagram shows the medieval understanding of spheres of the cosmos derived from Aristotle, as per the standard explanation by Ptolemy. It came to be understood that at least the outermost sphere marked print. I had it down and I can't see.
Primo mobile or primo mobile, something like that.
Thank you. It's the
Has its own intellect, intelligence, or nous, a cosmic equivalent to the human mind. The point here being that they used this idea of concentric circles to mark these abstract principles, such as the primo mobile.
I could see the connection to the notion of the light, the darkness, the light, the paradox.
Yeah, exactly. Here's that on the diagram, by the way. Can you see my cursor? BL, can you see my cursor?
Yes, it's up at the top, middle.
Good. That's one great thing about Zoom. Doesn't disappear your cursor. Okay, as to celestial movements, we have this ancient Greek model of the solar system called the Antikythera mechanism, discovered in 1901 deep beneath the sea off the coast of the Greek island, not surprisingly, of Antikythera. It's an astonishing discovery. Its 37 gears were capable of demonstrating the movements of the moon and the sun through the zodiac to predict eclipses and even to model the irregular orbit of the moon. On the right and bottom are two different reconstructions of the original, parts of which are shown at the top. Here's Uvarov's essay, which is cited here, on the mysteries of Eleusis, originally published in 1812. Immediately following MPH's paragraph-long Uvarov quote, the very next, and to my mind necessary, concluding sentence reads, most of these symbols, as we learn from St. Clement of Alexandria, belonged to the mysteries of Eleusis, thus suggesting that, for instance, a cone was used to symbolize the sun and the cylinder, the earth, etc., in some way during the Eleusinian ceremonies. Next up, the final short paragraph on the Eleusinian mysteries. Could we get a reader, please?
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please? Let me get down here. There you Can you talk?
There we go.
Okay.
I thought you unmuted me. I'm sorry. The Eleusinian mysteries, according to Hecathorn, survived all others and did not cease to exist as an institution until nearly 400 years after Christ, when they were finally suppressed by Theodosius, styled the Great, who cruelly destroyed all who did not accept the Christian faith. Of this greatest of all philosophical institutions, Cicero said that it taught men not only how to live, but also how to die.
Okay, to put this time frame into perspective, the Eleusinian mysteries, founded in at least as old as 1400 BC, lasted around 1800 years, which is almost as long as Christianity has lasted. So this was dominant throughout the ancient world for quite a while. You may remember that Theodosius was also responsible for the destruction of the Serapeum and the Library of Alexandria. We read an extensive quote about the destruction of the Serapeum in our segment on Serapis, and that he destroyed as many of the Gnostic manuscripts as his soldiers could find. Fortunately, he missed a few key ones, such as the Pistis Sophia. Okay, we'll finish our study of the Eleusinian Mysteries with a quote from the second volume of Joseph Campbell's Masks of God, which relates to Cicero's statement that the mysteries, quote, taught men not only how to live, but also how to die. Could we get a reader, please, for this short quote?
Yes, Carrie, can you read that for us, please? Here, can you talk now?
Yeah, okay, I'm there. In those rites of initiation with which such symbols were associated, as in the mysteries of Eleusis, the initiate, returning in contemplation to the goddess mother of the mysteries, became detached reflectively from the fate of his mortal frame, symbolically the son who dies, and identified with the principle that is ever reborn, the being of all beings, the serpent father. Whereupon in the world where only sorrow and death had been seen, the rapture was recognized as an everlasting becoming.
Thank you, Carrie. Any final thoughts or questions on anything relating to the Eleusinian Mysteries? Of course, we haven't been with him this session long enough for really many questions to form. If you missed the session or would like to review this subject, check out episodes 17 and 18 of The Secret Teachings on Makara or YouTube.
Okay,
Yeah.
we have a question. Go ahead, Yvonne. You should be able to unmute yourself, right?
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Francis, a couple slides back on Porphyria or something. What was his name? Porphyria?
Porphyry, yeah.
Porphyria.
That's the
Does
ways
that
back.
have anything to do with the disease porphyria of the blood?
Oh gosh, that's nothing that I'm aware. No connections that I'm aware of.
Okay, that just
Yeah, but that doesn't mean there isn't. You know, for instance, he may have been afflicted by a blood disease, and without it being specifically that disease, they would just relate, because this is so long ago, it's unlikely that any modern disease would be traceable to that time. So yeah, I would doubt that.
And
okay.
Veronica adds to the conversation. Thank you, Anne Veronica, our Greek translator here for us. She says porphyros equals deep red.
Oh, there you go. There it is. Thank you. That probably is the answer to your question, right? That it would be a natural bridge for the name of a blood disease.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. All righty. Next up, a much briefer section, but just as profound, on Orpheus and the Orphic Mysteries. So this begins on page 31 in the big book. So could we get a reader for this?
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Sure.
Self-mute. There you go.
The Orphic Mysteries. Orpheus, the Thracian bard, the great initiator of the Greeks, ceased to be known as a man and was celebrated as a divinity several centuries before the Christian era. As of Orpheus himself, writes Thomas Taylor, scarcely a vestige of his life is to be found amongst the immense ruins of time. For who has ever been able to affirm anything with certainty of his origin, his age, his country, and condition? This alone may be depended upon for general assent, that there formerly lived a person named Orpheus, who was the founder of theology among the Greeks, the institutor of their lives and morals, the first of prophets, and the prince of poets. himself the offspring of a muse who taught the Greeks their sacred rites and mysteries, and from whose wisdom, as from a perennial and abundant fountain, the divine muse of Homer and the sublime theology of Pythagoras and Plato flowed.
Any thoughts or questions about this introductory paragraph? Okay, first up, Orpheus. Yeah,
I
go
couldn't
ahead.
help noticing that in the very first, the frontispiece of the whole thing, with the picture of Orpheus, the very beginning, he has the most, you as a singer would appreciate it. He has the most terrible posture for a singer. Can you go to the very first one, the opening?
Oh, I see. Yeah, sure. Let me go back. Okay, this is slide 33. So hang on a sec. And get the whole thing and then go here. Yeah. And, in the chariot there, he
He's got
also
his
is kind of slow.
rounded back and his neck stretched out. He couldn't possibly produce a sound.
Yeah.
Isn't that so? You are a singer, Francis.
It would be, if you were mic'd, you could do okay in this position, working completely from your chest. But yeah, it's a good, it just shows that, you're a professional musician, that you would notice that. That's great. Thank you, Carrie. Okay, here we are back to this first statement. Orpheus, the Thracian bard, the great initiator of the Greeks, ceased to be known as a man and was celebrated as a divinity several centuries before the Christian era. Like the Norse Udun, remember him? Orpheus incarnated to teach humanity and was eventually elevated to deity status. Some histories like Orpheus by G.R.S. Mead argue that he was a composite of 5 sages. Other authors, including H.P.B., describes him as an actual person who was one of the 7 primordial sages of the ancient world. And I think this is a good place to set our understanding of the importance of this amazing being. Could we get a reader for this? I noticed Martha barely read last time. And also this is up off the bottom of the screen, so maybe that she would be a good one.
Go.
Whoop, I can't hear you.
Okay,
There you go. That's better.
can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
As to Enoch, Toth, or Hermes, Orpheus and Cadmus, these are all generic names, branches and offshoots of the 7 primordial sages, incarnated Dianchoans or Devas, in elusive, not mortal bodies, who taught humanity all it knew, and whose earliest disciples assumed their masters' names. This custom passed from the 4th to the 5th race. Hence, the sameness of the traditions about Hermes, of whom Egyptologists count 5, Enoch, etc. They are all inventors of letters. None of them dies, but still lives, and they are the first initiators into and founders of the mysteries. In Greece, he was called Orpheus, and thus changed his name with every nation, the number 7 being attached to and connected with each of these primitive initiators.
Primitive meaning, of course, early, and that they came forth in order to dispense the ageless wisdom, and as truly initiating whole civilizations into the ancient wisdom teachings.
Okay, let's get back to Carrie. Carrie, did you have a question?
No, I didn't. I only commented about the frontispiece, but I didn't
Okay.
hear. I didn't hear the response because my sound went. So I don't know what Francis actually said.
Oh,
Oh,
well, I was just agreeing with you, Carrie, that that slumped over position, that there's no projection possible through that. And then made the comment that if he was mic'd, he could probably get away with that position. And also suggesting that, it kind of shows that you're a professional musician, that you picked up on that. So that was my comment.
okay. And then
Okay, thanks.
hold on a minute, Scott. Anne Veronica wants to know, who are the 7 primordial sages?
Well, we have some listed here. Enoch, Toth, or Hermes, who was represented or overshadowed 5 actual incarnations. See, down here it says traditions about Hermes, of whom Egyptologists count 5, meaning historical figures. So we have Enoch, Hermes, Orpheus, and Cadmus. Those are what, 4 of them. You also have, gosh, I can't remember in the East. We're coming up on who the Indian one was. Um, since I'm not all knowing, I don't remember offhand just who that was. I know that's a huge disappointment to you all. So that's 5. And so they always come in 7s. This is very telling, and this is the kind of information you're only going to get from HPB, which are incarnated Dion Chohans. If you remember, if you participate in the Secret Doctrine series, that you have Dion Chohans on their own plane, which are literally chain lords, right, of the highest level. And somebody brought up the question, well, is the Dalai Lama, it's supposed, there are those who say the Dalai Lama is an incarnated Dion Chohan. And, you have this whole mystery of overshadowing, and even overshadowing of a lineage of which you can be a representative, and I think that's what we get into with the Dalai Lama lineage, right? So there are 7 Dian Chohans, and they overshadow these incarnations and those incarnations are these 7 primordial sources of wisdom, right? That initiate an entire ageless wisdom within a cultural context. Does that help? I hope. And so Orpheus is one of these, and in fact, he was one for all of Greece, not just the Orphic tradition, but also the Eleusinian tradition and the Bacchic tradition, etc.
Okay, and then Scott, you had your hand up. Did you have a comment?
I was just going to say something in defense of Orpheus's posture. That he's not known.
Go ahead.
He's not known for singing. He's known for playing his 7-string lyre.
Well, he was a bard. So there is song associated with that, but yes, that's true. So, he did both. But the magic came through the lyre. And we'll get into that. There's a whole section on the lyre. So hold on to that thought.
And then Anne Veronica says 20 animals plus Orpheus here in this image, 211. Wonder if these animals represent something.
Well, this is a Roman floor. The Romans weren't known for their deeply esoteric understanding. My guess is no, but it's entirely possible. I mean, if you include Orpheus and you come to 21, which is a very, very particular number, representative form of completion, it's 3 times 7. So, you have like the thrice great Hermes, so if they were thinking along those lines, it might be that. Good observation, though. Keep counting. It's interesting to look at what we have here, you know, all kinds of stuff. Anyone else?
That's all I got right now.
Okay. All right. Since Orpheus belongs to a class of incarnated Dian Chohans, it's no surprise that he was, quote, celebrated as a divinity, nor that, quote, scarcely a vestige of his life is to be found among the immense ruins of times. Well, you know, if you take HPB at her word, and there's many that don't, what does he say? She say here that where is it? That he just came in a myopic form. Where is that? I can't find it now. But that he, you know, he didn't incarnate in a fully physical body. So, of course, in that case, there wouldn't be much known about.
It was in that quote you just had highlighted.
I know it was, but I couldn't find it offhand.
It was no, it was right there. You got it highlighted. Incarnated.
Oh, that's why I didn't find it.
It's not the word you were looking for, but it is.
Yeah, I was looking at everything but the highlight. Yeah. So an elusive, not mortal body. So there's this points to this ancient tradition where masters incarnate without being born in the usual manner and are in myopic bodies, which appear to everyone around them as being normal, except for that they're radiant in their vibratory quality, right? So yeah. So,
And then
that,
also, Lynn says that the image seems to relate to the Chinese calendar.
okay. Oh, yeah. You mean the mosaic floor image? Yeah. This one, is that what you mean? I guess that's what she means.
Lynn?
Okay.
Yes, she says yes.
Okay. So, in his book, Orpheus, G.R.S. Mead, a great theosophist, gives us further insight into the Greek sages' origins. It's a brief quote. Could we get a reader, please?
Okay. I have to. Anne Veronica, can you read that for us, please? I can see that you're unmuted, but we're not hearing you, Anne Veronica.
We need you because you're our Greek expert. So we have to be able to get you on to where we can hear you.
Do you have a little button on your headset that might be on pause? Because it looks like you should be able to talk. No, we're not hearing you. Sorry.
Okay, work on that because there's a couple of Greek words in here we're going to be asking you to translate.
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. From the above, it may be easily seen that it is hopeless in the present state of our information to attempt to treat the legend of Orpheus from a historical point of view in the ordinary acceptation of the term. We only approach the historical period when we descend to the times of Homer, though indeed even then we have not entirely reached it. The stemma or line of descent of the gens Orphica places 10 generations of poets or schools of poets between Orpheus and Homer.
Thank you, Karen. I find this depiction of Orpheus from a Greek vase particularly arresting with its Mercury-like head wings and luminous heart center at the top point of a triangle formed by two straps. It's exactly where DK tells us to visualize a heart center. Okay, Joseph Campbell reconstructs the influence that the historical Orpheus, because he was said to actually incarnate, may have had on the people in his life. Could we get a reader for this? Including the caption to the, well, I'll just read that. Orpheus playing his harp for the wild beasts dates from about 194 of the Christian era and is the oldest of the Edessa Urda mosaics. Okay, if we could get a reader.
Joan, can you read that for us, please?
The name Orpheus itself belongs to the oldest level of Greek names, those ending in eus. For example, Atreus. Such are pre-Homeric. Early representations show him singing, drawing animals to him by the power of his song, also as a festival singer, whose listeners, significantly, are men. Dr. Carl Karenyi plausibly suggests that the basic idea is of an initiator whose power transforms even the wildest creatures, animals and men who live in the wilderness. Such a figure would have been associated with the initiation of young men in the wilds of nature, excluding women. There, something significant was disclosed to them in music and song that delivered them from their blood-spilling savagery and gave a deep sense to the ceremonies of transit from immaturity to adulthood. And the announcer of this mystery played the lyre, but was not a mere singer.
Thank you. So I see Scott has his hand up.
Go ahead, Scott. You should be able to talk.
I was just going to comment. This is the second depiction, as I recall, of Orpheus's lyre having 4 strings that you've shown.
You know,
Normally
go
it
ahead.
has 7, but it's also recorded that it's as having 3 and also 6 as it relates to the Pleiades and the lost Pleiade.
Yeah, you know, I did a search of images and I could find nary an ancient image with him with 7 strings. So I think this is, you know, I always hate to say it, but it could just be the artist unaware of the esoteric implications who's, you know, and like I said, I always hate to say that because I want to give credit where credit's due, but I never found 7. I found 5 and indeterminate amounts. But anyway, yeah, it's a good point. 7 is a critical number with this, as we'll find when we read a quote about the lyre specifically. Thanks for that.
And Martha has her hand up. Go ahead, Martha.
It brings to mind the wonder if the Orpheus story, never thought about it before, is that they're trying to depict their understanding of this laying in of consciousness from the animal kingdom into the human kingdom. That they're not trying. There seems to be perhaps a resonance, you know, that mystery of how did humans become conscious? What happened? And the fact that he's dated so much earlier than Homeric times. It's an interesting, it feels important to know something about this.
Yeah, it's a very fourth ray way of bringing forth you could say the fire of mind, the fire of consciousness, you know. We had Prometheus who, is well known in Lucifer for bringing the fire of mind into humanity. But here we have a different method but I think it's the same idea that through hearing, which is interesting because that's considered the first sense by DK, that there's a transference of consciousness. If I think actually esoterically that its effect on animals, though significant and noteworthy, was secondary to its effect on, those who were meant to gather around this great one, and be, in a sense, taught by this. Because as we know, the schools that form around these great masters are always made up of previous students or those who are ready to take that particular initiation. And I think in this case, that initiation did indeed happen through some form of vibratory transmission. It's really, an amazing idea.
It makes you think of the transferal, from to that humans become alert, receptive in an alert way through the hearing, but maybe they're even inventing the sensory sound based upon this internal transmission that they're receiving from the higher entities. It's very interesting. And thanks for mentioning it's array 4. I mean, I know it's obvious, but I didn't connect it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And
Francis?
of course, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Martha, I've been putting your hand down and it's up again.
So
anyway, Joan says related to that is creation by sound of the lyre.
well, of course, the logos is itself a sound-oriented concept, right? So it's, in a sense, transmission through sound. I'm glad you said that, right? Yeah, it's the most potent means. And it's also very specific to this fourth period for us, the being the fourth kingdom and the fourth chain of the fourth globe, right? Just moving from the fourth to the fifth race, but nonetheless, the human kingdom is a fourth and fifth rate kingdom. So there's going to be very much a quality, and that could be Scott going back to the 4 strings. That could be the reason for that. If there was some awareness on the part of this artist, it could be for that. It brings up something else, which is often you'll see 4 or 5 depicted with 2 or 3 hidden. Like if you look at the Diane Chohans illustrated by the Hindus, often or always, I should say, they just show 5 because they're showing the ones that have come so far, not the globes or races that are to come, right? The hidden ones. Let's see, anyone else? Anything else with that? I was going to say something to Martha about that. Anyway, oh yeah, that all the senses have higher correspondence, right? And it's even though there's going to be a response on the outer levels to the sound itself, there's the transformation might be taking place on the higher correspondences of sound on the astral, mental, even Buddhic levels for those ready to hear. Okay.
Thank you, Francis.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Many authors agree that Orpheus was, quote, the founder of theology among the Greeks. Again, we'll turn to HBB for a deeper insight into this particular subject. Could we get a reader, please?
Oh, sorry, I was taking care of some administrivia. Yes, Karen, can you read that for us, please?
In Egypt, the mysteries had been known since the days of Menes. The Greeks received them only when Orpheus introduced them from India. Indeed, when Orpheus, the son of Apollo or Helios, received from his father the Forminx, the
Forming.
seven, the
Forming.
se-
Yeah.
okay, Forminx,
No,
the
formings.
Forminx, the seven-stringed lyre, symbol of the sevenfold mystery of initiation. These mysteries were already hoary with age in Central Asia and India. According to Herodotus, it was Orpheus who brought them from India, and Orpheus is far anterior to Homer and Hesiod.
Okay, this is out of the ordinary for even other esoteric writers. Most consider him having reformulated the Egyptian mysteries for a presentation in Greece, that he was, some say, I think Mead says that he actually spent so much time in Egypt that he became a Greek initiate and completely was a complete master of the mysteries through that school, which is, of course, Isis Osiris, that school. But, you never want to sell HPV short because she was often the mouthpiece for higher sources. And so it could well be that he brought them from India. And if you look at India as the source for all the mysteries, then you could say by way of Egypt. Okay, any thoughts about this? All right. Among the singular features of Orpheus is that he was the, quote, prince of poets. And this is a bit technical, but I thought it was interesting nonetheless. It's about the nature of these hymns that he wrote. Reader, please.
Okay, we're going to try Anne Veronica again.
Oh, that'll be good.
Okay, I've asked you to, okay, now it looks to us like you're
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
thank God. For though according to Iamblichus, the Thracian Orpheus, who is more ancient than those noble poets, Homer and Hesiodos used the Doric dialect, yet the Athenian Onomacritus, who according to the general opinion of antiquity is the author of all the works now extant ascribed to Orpheus, might either, preserving the sentence and a great part of the words, only change the dialect and teach the ancient Orpheus to speak Hormically, or as I may say, Salonically, or might arbitrarily add or take away what he thought proper, which, as we are informed by Herodotus, was his practice with respect to the oracles. Gesner adds that it does not appear probable to him that Onomacritus would dare to invent all that he wrote, since Orpheus must necessarily at that time have been much celebrated, and a great variety of his verses must have been in circulation. I'm sorry, but I didn't read it well.
Oh, no, you were fine. So yeah, this is a bit technical here, but the upshot is that Onomacritus, and thank you, Anne Veronica, for teaching me how to pronounce that, Onomacritus.
Onoma means name. I don't know the
Oh,
word and I don't know the name. Onomacritus, that's why it was difficult for me to
I
read it.
see.
Onoma means name.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's interesting. That makes it quite generic, but the important part is, what he says here at the end is that, Orpheus and his hymns would have been so well known at the time of Onomakritas that he wouldn't have dared say, okay, back up a bit. Everything we know about Orpheus in terms of his hymns came through Onomakritas. And so what's being presented here is that because Orpheus was so well known at the time, he would not have dared to invent anything. He would have just translated, and would have done so as transparently as possible, right, to preserve the original. I think that's the upshot of this, right? Does not appear probable that Onomakritas would dare to invent all that he wrote, or maybe anything that he wrote, right? Okay, so that's in the introduction to Thomas Taylor's tract on the mystical hymns, and we'll take an example of one of those, translated from the Greek by Thomas Taylor. And could we get a reader for this, please?
Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. To the sun, here, golden Titan, whose...
Oop, you flicked out.
We lost you.
Yep, didn't hit it right. Here, golden Titan, whose eternal eye with matchless sight illumines all the sky, native, unwearied in diffusing light, and to all eyes the object of delight. Lord of the seasons, beaming light from far, sonorous, dancing in thy four-yoked car, with thy right hand, the source of morning light, and with thy left, the father of the night, agile and vigorous, venerable sun, fiery and bright around the heavens you run, foe to the wicked, but the good man's guide, o'er all his steps propitious you preside, with various sounding golden lyre, 'tis thine to fill the world with harmony divine.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay, somewhat of an exoteric translation. One, suspects that, were we to hear this accompanied by Orpheus's lyre, that there would be an experience of this great deity, right? Okay. Interesting. Number 8 is the Leo. It's the Leo card in the it's the strength card, which is related to Leo, and of which is triply ruled by the sun. Just couldn't help but notice. Okay, next up is short paragraph, please.
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Certainly. Orpheus was founder of the Grecian mythological system, which he used as the medium for the promulgation of his philosophical doctrines. The origin of his philosophy is uncertain. He may have got it from the Brahmins, there being legends to the effect that he was a Hindu, his name possibly being derived from...
Okay, Anna Veronica. What's that Greek word? Does that mean dark, like it says?
Sorry,
It's right
I was
here.
trying to find the name on my Orphanio. It means orphan.
This one?
It means orphan, yes. It means an orphan, orphanos.
Oh, well, I'm glad I asked you. Okay, possibly derived from orphan.
Open meaning dark.
Isn't that interesting? Different translation meaning dark, but you can see the connection. Thank you for that. Go ahead.
Okay, Orpheus was initiated into the Egyptian mysteries from which he secured extensive knowledge of magic, astrology, sorcery, and medicine. The mysteries of the Kabiri at Samothrace were also conferred upon him, and these undoubtedly contributed to his knowledge of medicine and music.
Thank you. As to that orphan reference, parentless is a way of describing being parentless is to be an orphan, right? And so since he was born of a maiavic body, it's, and also dark as in, you know, like those images I showed you, you know, of the dark Madonna and of the Kali figure. It's that same kind of orientation. Okay.
Yvonne
And
has her hand up. Go ahead, Yvonne.
You talk about dark images. When I was in Europe, in one of the European countries, there's a dark Madonna, and I brought home a picture of her, and it's a black Madonna. Is that something like the same thing, or is that something different?
exactly the same thing.
Exactly the same? Thank you.
Yeah, exactly the same thing. It's the idea is the reference is to the subjective, you know, that this isn't something that can be lit from outer sources of light. You know, it is dark to our light, you know. And also another way of looking at that is that absolute light is darkness to our eyes, you know. So the highest of the high are dark to our senses because they're not something the outer senses perceive.
Thank you.
Yeah. I saw Carrie bump in there for a minute.
I was just going to say, I think it's in Chartres, the Dark Madonna.
Oh yeah,
the Cathedral of Chartres.
That's right. I've seen that one. There's more than one.
Yes, there is.
There's
Yeah,
a few around, and that one's a famous one. Yeah,
mostly in France, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So as here stated, Orpheus wasn't just the founder of the Orphic Mysteries, but of all the Greek mystery schools. Again, we'll turn to G.R.S. Mead for further insight into the origins of Orphic philosophy and its connection with Hinduism. So, you know, there is some verification from what HPB said, which was that he comes from India. And let's take a look at this. This was the other one of the 7 that I was trying to remember the name of, the Veda Vyasa, you know. Okay, could we get a reader?
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Orpheus was to the Greeks what Veda Vyasa was to the Hindus, Enoch to the Ethiopians, and Hermes to the Egyptians. He was the great compiler of sacred scriptures. He invented nothing, he handed on. Orpheus, Veda Vyasa, Enoch, Hermes, and others are generic names. Veda Vyasa means the Veda arranger. It is said that the hieroglyphical treatise on the famous columns of Hermes, or Seth, which Josephus affirms were still existing in his time, was a source of the sacred science of ancient chem, and that Orpheus, Hesiod, Pythagoras, and Plato took therefrom the elements of their theology.
Thank you, Scott.
And chem, of course, is Egypt.
I'm sorry?
Chem is the ancient name for Egypt.
Exactly, right. Specifically, we're referring to pre-dynastic.
Yes.
As we understand it, of course, there would have been dynasty, but it would have been of godmen. Okay, so we get some further understanding here. Do you understand why these great ones invented nothing? Everybody get that? We're merely, quote unquote, Veda arrangers rather than inventors. Well, I'll answer my own question. The reason is that the quote invention is the source of the wisdom teachings themselves. So, right, coming from the ultimately the Lapika lords and the solar logos and the planetary logos, not from these great sages, but they were able to perceive the teachers and, quote, arrange them accordingly, right? Introduce them according to what is appropriate for the culture that they incarnate into. Okay. Next, we have Orpheus was initiated into the Egyptian mysteries from which he secured extensive knowledge of magic, astrology, sorcery, and medicine. Both Mead and Albert Pike give us the lineage that connects Egypt to Greece, as well as citing ancient sources that attest to Orpheus's skill in magic. This is maybe we get two readers for this, the top part here and the two for the two quotes.
Okay, first off, Anne Veronica says that she searched the name that we gave her, and there were two meanings, orphan and dark, from the Greek word orphany.
Okay.
So that answers that.
Yeah.
And good old Eagle Eye Lynn says that's a 7-string lyre.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Excellent.
Okay,
Good for you.
Now let's start with Carrie for the top part and then maybe Lynn for the second part, okay?
Ficinus.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Ficinus traces what the Hindus call the Guru Parampara chain, or succession of teachers, as follows. In things pertaining to theology, there were in former times 6 great teachers expounding similar doctrines. The first was Zoroaster, the chief of the Magi. The second, Hermes Trismegistus, the head of the Egyptian priesthood. Orpheus succeeded Hermes. Aglaophamus was initiated into the sacred mysteries of Orpheus. Pythagoras was initiated into theology by Aglaophamus, and Plato by Pythagoras. Plato summed up the whole of their wisdom in his letters. Apollonius says that the followers of Orpheus should be called magicians. Pausanias further cites an Egyptian opinion that Orpheus was skilled in magic. And Dio, Maximus, Heraclides, Quintilian, and Macrobius say that it was not the wild beasts that were charmed, so much as that men of a wild and unruly nature were brought back to a milder form of life by Orpheus. Euripides speaks of the spell of Orpheus, which the satyrs desired to possess.
Okay, before we read on, does anybody have any questions about this? I'm particularly taken by this quote, that it was the lower nature that was brought into a higher harmony more than the animals. I'm sure that they too, I mean, I've had actually direct experience of someone who was able to tame a wild animal. So I know that exists, but this would be the more significant, the fact that the unruly nature of humans. Okay, second quote, please.
Okay, Lynn, go ahead and read your comment before you read the
Would
passage.
that have referred to the animal men?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, the unruly nature, right. Certainly.
The great secrecy observed by the initiated priests for many years and the lofty sciences which they professed caused them to be honored and respected throughout all Egypt, which was regarded by other natures as the college, the sanctuary of the sciences and arts. The mystery which surrounded them excited a strong curiosity. Orpheus metamorphosed himself, so to say, into an Egyptian. He was initiated into theology and physics, and he has so completely made the ideas and reasonings of his teachers his own that his hymns rather bespeak an Egyptian priest than a Grecian poet. And this was the first who carried into Greece, the Egyptian fables.
Okay, so that helps us orient a little bit in terms of the lineage and influence. So finally, we have in this
Okay.
short.
I'm sorry, we have a comment from Greg. He says, I was also thinking in terms that these part animal, part human characters might be related to the Lemurians.
Well, okay, when we say animal, part animal is not quite correct. We're all part animal. You know, we live in animal bodies. So what would be being referenced here is that in our consciousness that is ruled by our animal nature, which is the lower aspects of our personality. It would be especially, you know, at this time. So there's Lemurian consciousness no longer incarnates. It's now considered to be below the threshold. We still do have Atlantean types incarnating, but the Lemurians are pretty much out of the picture, or we've integrated them, so to say. Okay.
All right, we have a couple of hands up. Yvonne, you want to go ahead?
Okay, that second paragraph, I was just wondering, that Apollonius, was that Jesus in one of his incarnations, or is that a different Apollonius?
That's Apollonius of Tyana. Let's see, let me find it here. There's no way of knowing for sure. There were other Apolloniuses. If I was going to guess, I would say that since this is quoted from Mede, I would say it's very likely that it's Apollonius of Tyana. But of course, that would have come from the Neoplatonist writings. So very likely. I can't say for sure. But wasn't there also an Apollonius? I think there was also a Greek Apollonius of that time. I can't definitively answer your question.
Okay, and Carrie's got his hand up, but Greg had a follow-on comment that he said, I guess you could say that Lemurian consciousness is pre-conscious.
Well, depending on what I mean, a rock is conscious, but it's also very much pre-conscious. If you're orienting to any stage higher than that. So yes, you could say that, based on our current overall human level of consciousness, that you could call Lemurian pre-conscious. What they did, it was the first integration between the etheric and the physical vehicle. That was the great integration that occurred as a result of that. And then later in that race, and early in the Atlantean root race, you had that combination integrating with the astral. The current astrally polarized population, which belonged to the Atlantean race proper, is the effort to integrate the astral and mental, which finally results, when that's done, in mental polarity. And then we become, once you're mentally polarized, you become a fully integrated human being, and which allows you to have an integrated personality, what DK just calls a personality. He says something like about a third of the people in the world alive today are personalities, right? Okay.
And then Carrie's got his hand up. Go ahead, Carrie.
Francis, so what is the source of this I think it's a painting, isn't it, or a fragment of a
Oh gosh,
painting?
I'm not sure. I think
No.
it's from a Roman. It's
Oh.
a later drawing, if I'm remembering, and I should have given an inscription. Usually, when I don't have a title, it's because I've made some effort to find one and can't. But just from the style of it, this is a sketch from much later of an earlier, possibly, bas relief or something else. Or it could just be a sketch originating, and the Renaissance or later.
Yeah, there are
Look
two
of the
strange things in it. There's a right hand of somebody on the left-hand side. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's because I cut it off.
I thought it was a fragment. And what do you think he's got in his left hand, Orpheus? Because
Yeah,
I saw that in another one too.
interesting. Almost looks like the S of a music staff. Gosh, I can't say. Yeah, and it's interesting. The
Maybe he
left
had
hand
to.
holding that is almost has there's a mudra that has those two fingers extended like that, and it could be, that's indicated, but I'm not sure what that. So it's so particular, that item, um, but I couldn't tell you what it is.
Yeah, it's so detailed that it's as though there's a tuning mechanism in the middle, because he had to tune his strings, of course.
Right.
And maybe this thing in his left hand is something to do with that.
Something related with that. Yeah, it might be. Thank you, Terry.
Okay.
Anyone else before we go on?
Oops, yes. Greg, we got something here from Greg and from Joan, but Greg says, thank you for your elaboration. He says, when Sanat Kumara incarnated and took form, leading us to conscious beings, i.e. the personalities.
Right. Well, yes, it's, within the realm of kingdoms that make up his constitution, is the kingdom of souls, which have acquiesced to overshadow us in such a way that we can come to fulfill one of Sanat Kumara's fundamental purposes. So yeah, from that perspective, right?
And then Joan says, I assumed, talking about what he's got in his left hand there, I assumed it was used to play the lyre. An earlier one was much stranger.
Might be some kind of plucking mechanism. Usually, it's all the stranger for that, because usually the, harp and lyre players want a free left hand, in order to play. I mean, it's usually played with both hands. You don't, but who knows? It could be just that exactly. I don't know.
And then Lynn, you have your hand up. Did you want to say something?
Yes, looking up in Wikipedia, the different Apollonius, I can't say the word.
Apollonius.
Thank you. What century are we talking about here?
Well, Apollonius was something like 13th, 12th, 13th, 14th century. I'm not sure exactly when the Neoplatonists were, and this, if it's concurrent, would be any time from 4th century BC to 4th century AD. There were
got Apollonius, Cronus, philosopher of the Megarian school, Apollonius of Chalcedon, philosophy tutor to the emperors Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus, Apollonius of Syria, Platonic philosopher, Apollonius of Tyre, a philosopher, a Stoic philosopher, and Apollonius Paradoxographus.
So, Mead is a little bit remiss, isn't he, by not telling us which Apollonius. You can see why it'd be a common name. It'd be like what's oh, come on.
Smith, Jones.
No, that's not what I was thinking of, though. I was thinking of what's the oh, my mind is just not working real well. Anyway, Apollo is the sun god, and so you would be naming, one would be through stature or by birth, given that name, as likely by stature as by a birth name, to represent the solar principle in your name, so yeah. So who knows?
And then Martha S. says, I came across a fellow online once who reconstructed and plays the music of these old instruments.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, because there is some bit of notation that has come to us from the Greeks, and just figuring out, first of all, what the notation references, because it's not necessarily what our modern notation references. Like, for instance, lines, position of the slashes or dots, etc. But there's been a lot of scholarship in this area because they were renowned for their music, right? And it's one of the things that is almost entirely lost. Okay, shall we go on? So finally, we have the mysteries of the Kabiri at Samothrace were also conferred upon him, meaning Orpheus, and these undoubtedly contributed to his knowledge of medicine and music. The name I was trying to think of before was Muhammad, be like Apollonius, right? It's because you're directly referencing the Godhead, Muhammad, right? Or in this case, the messenger of the Godhead. So Apollo, Apollonius would be that same kind of a name. See, my mind does work. It just sometimes takes 2 or 3 minutes when I'm lucky. Okay. MPH includes a segment called the Kabiric Mysteries of Samothrace in his upcoming chapter on Atlantis. It's our very next chapter, in fact. Until then, here's a preview from Morals and Dogma. Could we get this is a fascinating reference. Could we get a couple of readers for this, please? Let's see, yeah, one reader for this and then another for the next page.
Okay, I'm going to call on Nisa to read this because she has a comment reference to what Orpheus had in his hand. So go ahead. Here, let me unmute you. Let me find you. There we go. All right, you should be able to talk now. So go ahead and add your comment, and then if you will read this first page, and then I'll read the next coming up page.
You can hear me, right? I'm having
loud and clear.
Good. The little hand of Samoth.
Island.
The island. Oh, okay. I'm also having trouble with my eyes here. Was long the depository of certain august mysteries, and many went thither from all parts of Greece to be initiated. It was said to have been settled by the ancient Pelasgi, early Asiatic colonists in Greece. The gods adorned in the mysteries of this island were termed Kabiri, an Oriental word from Kabar, great. Vado calls the gods of Samothrace potent gods. In Arabic, Venus is called Kabar. Vado says that the great deities whose mysteries were practiced there were heaven and earth. These were but symbols of the active and passive powers of principles of universal generation. The twins, Castor and Pollux, or, the Dioscuri, were also called the gods of Samothrace, and the scholiast of Apollonius, citing, jump in, give the names of Ceres, Proserpine, Pluto, and Mercury as the four Cabiric divinities worshipped at Samothrace as Axieros, Axiosera, Axioceros, and Casmilus. Mercury was there, as everywhere, the minister and messenger of the gods, and the young servitors of altars and the children employed in the temples were called Mercuries or Casmili, as they were in Tuscany by the Etrusci and Pelasgi, who shipped the great gods.
Yeah, you really got stuck with a hard one here. Why don't let's break it up, give you a break and put this burden on somebody else, because it continues with names.
Okay, I'll try it. And then if the next page is just as bad, I'm calling on Anne Veronica. Okay, so Tarquin the Etruscan was an initiate of the mysteries of Samothrace, and Etruria had its Kabiri as Samothrace had. For the worship of the Kabiri spread from that island into Etruria.
Phrygia.
There you go, and Asia Minor. And it probably came from Phoenicia into Samothrace. For the Kabiri are mentioned by
Sanchoniathon.
Okay, and the word Kabar belongs to the Hebrew, Phoenician, and Arabic languages. The Dioscuri, tutelary deities of navigation with Venus, were invoked in the mysteries of Samothrace. The constellation Auriga or Phaeton was also honored there with imposing ceremonies. Upon the Argonautic expedition, Orpheus, an initiate of these mysteries, a storm arising, counseled his companions to put into Samothrace. They did so. The storm ceased, and they were initiated into the mysteries there and sailed again with the assurance of a fortunate voyage under the auspices of the Dioscuri, patrons of sailors and the navigation.
New reader?
I'm just going to try to
go for
continue.
it.
But much more than that was promised the initiates. The Hierophants of Samothrace made something infinitely greater to be the object of their initiations, to wit, the consecration of men to the deity by pledging them to virtue and the assurance of those rewards which the justice of the gods reserve for initiates after death. This, above all else, made these ceremonies august and inspired everywhere a great respect for them and so great a desire to be admitted to them. It was this that originally caused the island to be styled sacred and to be respected by all nations. The Romans, when masters of the world, left its liberty and laws. It was an asylum for the unfortunate and a sanctuary inviolable. Children of tender age were initiated there and invested with the sacred robe, the purple cincture, and the crown of olive, and seated upon a throne like other initiates. In the ceremonies was represented the death of the youngest of the Kabiri, slain by his brothers who fled from Etruria, carrying with them the chest or ark that contained his genitals, and there the phallus and the sacred ark were adored. Herodotus says that Samothracian initiates understood the object and origin of this reference paid the phallus and why it was exhibited in the mysteries. Clemens of Alexandria says that the Kabiri taught the Tuscans to revere it. It was consecrated at Heliopolis in Syria, where the mysteries of a divinity having many points of resemblance with Attis and Sybil were represented. The Pulaski connected it with Mercury, and it appears on the monuments of Mithras, always and everywhere a symbol of the life-giving power of the sun at the vernal equinox.
Okay, thanks, Biel. I think you did great with that. So why would a phallus become sacred? This is not unique to this place, to Samothrace. You find this in all the ancient mystery teachings. What does it say here? Slain by his brother, who fled to Etruria, carrying with him the chest or ark that contained his genitals. And there the phallus and sacred ark were adored. So why would that be? What's up with that? You're welcome to answer. I'll begin by answering my own question, which is the phallus represents what you literally the seminal source of the origins, right? If all you're doing is creating a child, then that's what is sourced. But for such a one as Orpheus, that would be representative of the source of the higher, the direct source of the higher knowledge, of the higher vibration, literally the source itself, right? I know this first page was tricky, full of strange words. And the reason for this, and the reason that Albert Pike spends so much time here, is because anybody who's interested can take any one of these references, right, and like the Scholiast of Apollonius and Manassius, etc., and use it to find out more about the provenance of this mystery school, right? Notice that, at least according to one ancient source, the four Kabiri of Samothrace, or Samothrace, I'm not sure, were associated with Sirius, Proserpine, Pluto, and Mercury. Does that ring a bell? Well, it should, because these were the primary gods and goddesses of the Eleusinian mysteries. So you had them literally overshadowing the four Kabiric divinities, right? It's like the Dhyani Chohans and those that they overshadow, the great masters. They introduce the ancient wisdom teachings. You have the same kind of thing here, but representative of the players in the Eleusinian mysteries. It also just shows how close-knit all the Greek mysteries were, but not identical, especially the myths themselves were not identical, as we'll discover as we get, especially when we get into Bacchus. Okay, any thoughts or
All right.
questions?
Yes, we've had a number of questions pop up while you were talking. Lynn says I can't say it. Apollonius Cronus, philosopher of Megarian school, a Chaldean philosophy tutor of Marcus. I think she means Marcus is cut off there. A representative of life.
That was applying to the phallus and the genitals.
To that previous. Oh,
okay. And also, Greg says in the same context, it's the seed, probably used by many of the gatherer peoples when we start to garden and come together as greater humanity.
Well, exactly. And Persephone herself is seen as the seed of the underworld, right, from which light comes. And this has this direct, those who don't believe in any of this stuff just consider her, a harvest goddess, right? Because you plant the seed and then the new harvest comes out of that, and that's what she represented. So it's the heat of the earth, created by the new seed. So you have, a very similar thing with the seed that comes from the phallus. Very, very much the same idea.
And then Sri Yantra says, was there not a period of movement from the matriarchal based life to the patriarchy? Perhaps worship of the phallus was representative of that. She says, I have some memory of previous studies about this, but no reference comes to mind.
Yeah, that's what's called the Hellenes, which is this, it's really prehistoric Greek, was known for that matriarchal society. And of course, and I think, in the Dionysian rites, you have some of that that's referenced, even though by that time the change had happened, to a patriarchal society. So yeah, I think that's likely. Anyone else? Okay. Up next, could we get a reader for this, please?
Yes, I'm going to ask Greg to read it, but first, Greg, go ahead and say your comment or read it.
Okay, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I was just referring back to what Sri Yatra just said, in that the Hellenic mysteries, which are also associated with Serapis Bey and the fourth ray early on, I guess they were considered, fourth ray early coming in. So maybe at the time of the fourth ray first starting to make it some first impression coming into this situation. So that's what I was saying here. And then I'll read when you guys are ready.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so Orpheus, the Thracian bard, the great initiator of the Greeks.
When I ask you to read, the grayed out area is just so you can have a reference, and you always want to start with the black. So here's the Romance of Orpheus.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. The Romance of Orpheus and Eurydice is one of the tragic episodes of Greek mythology and apparently constitutes the outstanding feature of the Orphic rite. Eurydice, in her attempt to escape from a villain seeking to seduce her, died from the venom of a poisonous serpent which stung her in the heel. Orpheus, penetrating to the very heart of the underworld, so charmed Pluto and Persephone with the beauty of his music that they agreed to permit Eurydice to return to life if Orpheus could lead her back to the sphere of the living without once looking round to see if she were following. So great was his fear, however, that she would stray from him, that he turned his head, and Eurydice, with a heartbroken cry, was swept back into the land of death.
Oh boy, still has an effect after all these thousands of years, huh? Okay, so MPH gives us a further insight into the myth of Eurydice in an article from his monthly magazine, Horizon. This was written about 20 years after the Secret Teachings. Could we get a reader, please?
Joan, are you willing to give this a try?
I will. I also have one other little comment. I didn't have it. I was just about to put up my hand. I had a 3-volume book about Apollonius of Tyana, which talks about first century holy man who traveled. And there are several references in it to Orpheus, actually.
And that may be the
And
source. No,
I'll just, can I read one little short paragraph about that? It says,
not too long, but yeah, go
no,
ahead.
it's not long. It's not long. He also entered the shrine of Orpheus after putting in at Lesbos. Here they say Orpheus once loved to indulge in prophecy, which was the business of Apollo himself. People were no longer going to something for oracles, nor to Claris, nor to any place where the tripos of Apollo stands. But Orpheus alone was giving oracles, his head having lately arrived from Thrace. So the god appeared to him as he was prophesying and said, "Stop doing my business, since I put up with you long enough when you were a singer."
Thanks for the humorous interlude. That's interesting.
Sorry
Yeah.
about that. It was
God,
written by Philostratus.
demonstrating his prophet. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't, it took me a minute to grab the book. Okay, here we go. Eurydice is one of the earliest forms of the Virgin of the world. She represents the human soul as differentiated from Orpheus, the higher spiritual nature. This differentiation is clearly revealed in the Bible by two simple statements. The soul that sinneth, it shall die, but the spirit returns to God who gave it. The Orphics conceived of the soul as a radiant maiden in love with her own spirit. The spirit was the lover and the soul was the beloved. Thus, the bards and poets used the symbolism of romantic literature to conceal the love story of the spirit and the soul. Orpheus, wandering alone in the mountains and crying for his lost Eurydice, is the immortal spirit of man, grieving for the soul torn from him by the sting of the serpent of the mind, which has been carried away into the dark realms of Hades, the state of materiality. The Orphic legend is a form of the Eleusinian ritual in which Persephone, the world soul, is kidnapped by Hades, the body principle, and is held prisoner in form during the span of material life. We must realize that Orphism was basically a mystic cult, and mysticism emphasizes the power of love as being greater than the power of reason. The premise is that the human being may experience emotionally that which he cannot analyze intellectually. In fact, nearly all emotions are destroyed by analysis. They are intangible.
No, it should be R.
Okay, they are intangible, inspirational reflexes, and are destroyed by the very process of definition. The mystical experience is an intense sublimation of emotional force. It is emotion turned toward the experiencing of universal truth. This discovery of the self in other things, and of all things in the self, and the resulting tender regard for life and all that lives, is the spiritual love of the mystics. They learn to know things by loving things. This love is a sharing of themselves, a sacrament of divine passion, climaxing in a complete adoration of God and the loss of the personal self in the impersonal self.
Thank you. Well, MPH at its best. And this buried in an article of Horizon magazine. Yeah, I'm especially fond of this interpretation. It's I think he really hit the nail on the head. Earliest Eurydice, earliest forms of the Virgin of the world, represents the human soul as differentiated from Orpheus, the higher spiritual nature, right? And you see this in the painting, right? And he's having his lyre with like 10 or 12 strings on. So it makes the myth much easier to read. Okay.
Francis,
Yeah.
Anne Veronica wants to know in what page is this quote in the book?
Oh gosh, I didn't put a page number. I'll have to get back to you. I don't have that right yet. Yeah, if you can make a note of Aunt Veronica's email address and send it to me, and I'll find that. I don't know why I didn't put it, and then I'll send it to her. Is that okay? Yeah.
Sure.
Great. Thanks. All
What
right.
slide number is that? Can you tell?
Sure. It is number 59.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's finish MPH's description of the myth and of Orpheus's death.
Do you need a reader?
Yeah, please.
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Orpheus wandered the earth for a while disconsolate, and there are several conflicting accounts of the manner of his death. Some declare that he was slain by a bolt of lightning. Others that failing to save his beloved Eurydice, he committed suicide. The generally accepted version of his death, however, is that he was torn to pieces by Ciconian women whose advances he had spurned. In the 10th book of Plato's Republic, it is declared that because of his sad fate at the hands of women, the soul that had once been Orpheus, upon being destined to live again in the physical world, chose rather to return in the body of a swan than be born of woman. The head of Orpheus, after being torn from his body, was cast with his lyre into the river Hebrus, down which it floated to the sea, where, wedging in a cleft in a rock, it gave oracles for many years. The lyre, after being stolen from its shrine and working destruction of the thief, was picked up by the gods and fashioned into a constellation.
Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, so again, MPH expands on the myth. Let me check that's a different magazine. Yeah. And again, I don't have a page number, sorry. Gosh, I don't know why. Go ahead. Could we get a reader, please, for these two quotes?
Scott, can you read that, please?
Yeah, I was going to mention that later the swan that Orpheus is turned into is the mother of the Dioscuri, Castor and Pollux.
Oh yeah, well there you go. And in fact, I end this section on a long description of the swan and its importance in mythology. So there may be a reference to that there. Thank you.
I may have that mixed up with Zeus being swan. Anyway, connected with Castor and Pollux. So here we go.
Bacchantic. Yeah, it's Bacchus.
Yeah.
So it's Bacchantic, meaning those who, were practicing the Bacchic rites.
Bacchantic bands of Ciconian women roamed these mountains, performing the orgies of the god Bacchus. They gathered about Orpheus, inviting him to join in their frenzies. When he refused, they grew angry and attacked him with javelins and arrows. But the sweet singer was protected from all harm by the magic of his song. Then the Bacchantes hit upon their evil subterfuge. They raised their voices in shrill, discordant cries till they drowned out the gentle music of the divine bard. His protection thus overcome, he was torn limb from limb by the frantic Bacchantes. This is symbolic of the manner in which the universal principle of harmony is destroyed by the discordances of materialism and false doctrines arising from souls intoxicated with the delusion of materialism. The head of Orpheus, like that of Bacchus, was rescued and placed in a temple together with his lute. This head represents the secret doctrine which did not die, although its sanctuaries were violated by fanatics. It is said that the head of Orpheus was made to speak by Pythagoras. This intimates that the school of Pythagoras restored the secret teachings of the Orphics.
Thank you. So do you remember Mimir's well from the Udanic Mysteries, which, quote, watered the roots of Midgård, the human realm? Well, Mimir, a wise man who, quote, helped the gods retain their ancestral wisdom, was beheaded during a war between the two tribes of gods. As in the case of Orpheus, his dismembered head, a metaphor for, quote, the secret doctrine that did not die, became an oracular source of wisdom. It just shows just another way that these mystery schools are deeply connected. Oh.
Okay, and you have a comment from Greg. He says this mythical tale also sounds very similar to the Osiris-Isis tales of similar considerations. And he says, I wonder if the timelines are similar.
Well, it should, because all of the European and Germanic mystery schools, all the way up into, including those that occurred in the Celtic tradition, all have their roots, first of all, originally in the Hindu traditions of the myth, but more specifically in the Isis Osiris mythology. And we'll be getting into that, if you stick around long enough, there's a huge section coming up on the Egyptian mysteries. And so we'll be moving there, and you'll see the connections. But absolutely, you'll see all kinds of connections in detail and in the overall thrust of the mythology. Okay, can we get a reader, please?
Yes, Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Okay. Orpheus has long been sung as the patron of music. On his seven-stringed lyre, he played such perfect harmonies that the gods themselves were moved to acclaim his power. When he touched the strings of his instrument, the birds and beasts gathered about him, and as he wandered through the forest, his enchanting melodies caused even the ancient trees, with mighty effort, to draw their gnarled roots from out of the earth and follow him. Orpheus is one of the many immortals who have sacrificed themselves that mankind might have the wisdom of the gods. By the symbolism of his music, he communicated the divine secrets to humanity, and several authors have declared that the gods, though loving him, feared that he would overthrow their kingdom and therefore reluctantly encompassed his destruction.
So MPH expands on the mesmeric quality of Orpheus's music in a publication, it's a much earlier publication than what we've been looking at, called simply A Monthly Letter, right? Just written a few years after publication of the Secret Teachings. And let's see, yeah, let's divide this in half and have two readers going down to follow him, and then the next one picking up with the particular. And that'll be the last thing we read today.
Okay, Martha G, can we start with you? And then we'll pick up with Karen G, okay?
Martha, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Great, we hear you. So if you read down to this ellipsis.
We lost her again. Hold on a minute.
Okay, back again?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Orpheus spent his days in the mountains. The wooded highlands of Thrace echoed with the music of his lyre. Not alone did he charm men with his song, but all nature succumbed to the magic of his spell. The trees stilled the rustle of their leaves. The birds gathered silently on overshadowing boughs, while animals came from their lairs, and even the fish in the pools gathered close to the verdant banks, listening to the magic of his song. Thus it came about that Orpheus received the title of the sweet singer, and it was reported of him that even the stony heart of the rock was softened by his blessed harmonies. Orpheus is supposed to have been one of the Argonauts in quest of the Golden Fleece. The ship Argo, moved by the Orphic lyre, glided gently through the sea. Later, the divine music parts of the Chionian rocks, breaks the spell of the sirens, and wakes the sleepers of Lemnos. According to Euripides, Orpheus was the harper who compels the rocks to follow him.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Karen?
Okay, I don't see the last sentence though.
I'll read for you when that comes.
Okay. The particular symbol of the Orphic cult was the forminix, the lyra of 7 strings, which according to H.P. Blavatsky is the 7-fold mystery of initiation. It was from the Orphic lyre that Pythagoras derived his inspiration to investigate the music of the spheres. If the 7 strings of the forminix be understood as representing the 7 parts of man and the 7 divisions of the human soul, then the whole study of harmonics becomes symbolical of inward adjustment. Man, perfecting his own nature, becomes the master musician, drawing divine melodies from the chords of his own being. Chording is combining. It is bringing harmonic values together according to law and rule. Living is likewise a science of combining. After the death of Orpheus, his lyre was suspended in the temple of Apollo, where it remained a great time universally admired. At last there came to the temple Neanthus, the son of Picatus, who, learning of the magical powers of the Orphic lyre, sought to gain possession of it. He bribed one of the priests to substitute a replica of the original instrument and departed from the city, concealing the enchanted lyre under his robes. Arriving at a safe distance, he stopped in a forest, attempting to play the sacred melodies. However, his untutored fingers produced only discord, and he was torn to pieces by wild dogs who gathered enraged at his inharmonic sounds. By this, the Greek fabulists implied that when the mystical theology comes into the hands of the profane, it is perverted. The evil destroys itself and him who
perpetrates it. Okay, and here I give you the page numbers in this letter. Okay, I know we're out of time, but any thoughts or questions about this? Most esoteric is this passage. The 7 strings of the forminix be understood as representing the 7 parts of man and the 7 divisions of the human soul, then the whole study of harmonics becomes symbolical inward adjustment. This perspective moves the effect of Orpheus's music from, you could say, from myth to occult science. For example, it's easy to imagine that the lyre in the hands of a master such as Orpheus could stimulate and adjust the etheric centers of those within earshot of his lyre. And we're going to have to stop there. It's fascinating and interesting study. When's our next dates?
Okay, the next webinar is going to be on the 3rd Sunday of March, and that's going to be the Secret Doctrine webinar. That will be on 21 March, and it will be at 7 p.m. GMT. Okay, and the next STOA, Secret Teachings of All Ages, which is what this webinar series is usually held on the first Sunday of each month, but because the first Sunday of April, which is Easter, we've moved it, and it will be on the 11th of April at 7 p.m. So those of you who are already registered, you should get the new emails reminding you a week out and a day out and an hour out. So we've got everything set up. It gives you the time, and we hope to see you all there.
Great. So I want to make one correction. Neoplatonism was like in the 1st and 2nd century AD. I don't know what I was thinking, about 12th to 14th century. It was early on. So, okay. My privilege to host these. Thank you very, very much for attending. And we'll see you on the 3rd Sunday for the Secret Doctrine, and then get back to this next month. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye,
you, classes.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good to be with you. Bye-bye.